report into alcohol restrictions in Alice Springs is due to be delivered today. The Northern Territory Police Association claims it wasn't consulted ahead of the report's release. Joining me live is Association President Paul McCue. Thanks very much for your time. So what can you tell us about this? No consultation at all? Any contact at all? Was it made to you in regards to this report?
Yeah, good morning and thanks for having me. Obviously, I don't think we're alone as a representative body or a key stakeholder in not being consulted. I guess the government gave the central controller 1 week to undertake this consultation, which is a little surprising in itself. It tends to indicate, certainly from our perspective, that, somewhat a fait accompli in terms of what may be coming next. But certainly we anticipate the police senior executive here in the Northern Territory certainly would have been part of some of those discussions, but as a representative body of some 99% of our police officers here, we certainly had no contact from her.
If you had contact, what would you have said?
Yeah, look, obviously, there's been some critical, timelines when you look back over what should have been occurring since 2016. The Northern Territory government, came into play in 2016 with the promise of, removing silos around government agencies, making them work together. A significant investment in 2018 was announced after the Royal Commission into youth detention here in the Northern Territory, into reducing harm and youth justice reforms. What's been done since then? Very little by the look of it, when you look at what's had to play out over the last week or so here in the Territory.
Well, we've had some restrictions brought back in, so what's the situation on the ground right now, perhaps last night, compared to a week ago?
Yeah, I've been in touch with several of our members down there in Alice Springs in Central Australia, and certainly those restrictions that have come into play overnight, effectively following the Prime Minister's visit, have made an immediate impact. Obviously, there needed to be a circuit breaker to the horrific levels of crime and alcohol-related harm there in Central Australia, and it has made a difference. I know our police have given us the feedback. It certainly has made a difference, but it's certainly not the long-term solution. The clear message from our members to government, both federally and in the Territory, there must be a clear lens about what's next. We can't have restrictions in place like this forever, but ultimately we know they've made an immediate impact in the town, and what that means now is hopefully we've got time to look at those longer term solutions.
If the restrictions have buy-in, i.e. voted for in a ballot, would that be more viable? What have you made of the ballot proposal?
Look, to be honest, I think it's quite farcical, really. I mean, you're talking about going to a ballot with many members of our community who are dependent on alcohol, to ask them to vote whether they like to keep alcohol in those communities. I mean, I think we need to be a little bit more realistic than that. I think that's not the appropriate measure. We saw when the Stronger Futures legislation was in place, those particular restrictions were making a significant difference. The government did undertake a review in 2017 here in the Northern Territory, which provided a clear recommendation then that the Stronger Futures legislation would cease in 2022. So get your wheels on, get your skates on, and get the consultation underway then, which didn't take place. So it's quite clear we need to reintroduce those sorts of measures to allow time for proper consultation to take place, including looking at the banned drinker register and perhaps expanding that through the Territory.
There appears to be a bit of a disconnect between the advice or the suggestions coming from the Police Minister and the Police Commissioner on solutions. Do you sense that? Do you think they're on the same page or not?
Yeah, look, I think it's challenging. Police have been severely under-resourced here in the Territory for some time, and I think the more legislative change that takes place, the more the government's policy goes in a direction of less incarceration, less desire to have restrictions around alcohol. That impacts on our police and our front line significantly. We saw when the Stronger Futures was ceased in the middle of last year, crime up 40-50% across the board. Of course, it's the police bearing the brunt of that. So the Commissioner, when he's told, you need to have more staff in Alice Springs, you need to be doing this or that, we don't have 40 or 50 police here in the Northern Territory sitting around waiting for such a direction to be given. ultimately he needs to be able to manage his police force how he sees. And if the government feel there needs to be more police, the upcoming budget needs to reflect that.
There's been that call from you. It's been pushed back on by the Chief Minister, I'll note, but we'll see where that ends up. Just wanted to ask you as well, business owner Darren Burton told my colleague Laura Jays that there was actually an increase in crime in Alice Springs following the police shooting at Yuendamu. That was in November 2019. Do you agree with that?
Look, I think there's a lot of factors that have been at play in relation to increased crime. I think, when we talk about government policy and legislative change, that's probably had the bigger impact in the ability for police to actually control crime in that community, and more so than any one particular event. So I think we've got to be careful pinpointing something when there's a whole raft of changes that have taken place in the last 2 or 3 years particularly.
Paul McCue, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Good on you. Thanks, Tom.